intense context behind what it means to be African American.
See, this is where it always goes.
You ain't gotta go nowhere. Everything will be right here, right here. You ain't gotta go nowhere. Everything you need right here, right here.
What's going on? I'm Anuki the One, back with another video, and in this video, I will be reacting to Finding Your Roots with Pharrell and Louis Henry Gates, I think is his name. Henry Louis Gates. So, Dan Calloway pretty much exposed Henry Louis Gates for pretty much being a profiteer of African American ancestry and fabricating the truth and fabricating a narrative that is just not true. We're learning that. We're coming for the next. And shout out to Dan Calloway because he has really paved the way, and he's been creating content consistently that really breaks down a lot of things and helps us to reprogram our mind. I've been doing the research since before I knew Dan Calloway, but he definitely motivates me to continue to do the research, and I take a lot of the stuff that he talks about and I go down the rabbit hole for myself. That's with anybody, and that's what I encourage y'all to do with any of the content that y'all see from me. Anything to say, the things that I say, I highly recommend you do the research for yourself because everybody is an individual. We're all different, so highly recommend doing your own research with everything. But yeah, it's cold out here in these Houston streets. It's been 40, 50 degrees out here. I know some of y'all up north is like, that ain't nothing. It's something to me, that nigga. It's something to me. All right, let's watch it. By the way, Pharrell Williams is one of my favorite artists, favorite producers of all time. Super inspirational. Some of the words he said in an interview has carried me as a producer and an artist, you know, for the past 10 years. So I love it. So let's see what he got to say.
We took musician Pharrell Williams on an extraordinary journey, all thanks to one single document. The story begins with his great-great-grandfather, a man named Fenner Williams. Fenner died in 1927, but his sister, Jane Arrington, lived into the late 1930s. And near the end of Jane's life, she was interviewed about her experiences under slavery.
Well, that's when they were
Pharrell
born.
the opportunity to read the
Born in 1852.
words of one of his own relatives who had endured bondage, something very few African Americans are ever able to do.
You would think that if slavery was such a big deal, that if it happened so widespread like how they taught us, you would think that this wouldn't be hard to find, you know, like in letters and different things like that. Like they say it's so hard, it's so rare for anyone to ever be able to read this, but you would think if this whole slave narrative was the way they said, it would be a lot easier, you know what I'm saying? Or it would be a lot less of a surprise when they find documents like this. We should all have documents like this if this is all of our story.
I was born on the 18th of December, 1852. I was born on the plantation near Tar River. My mother was named Louisa May, and my father was named Louis May. My mother had 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls.
Pause. I'm trying to do the math in my head. So, if she was born in 1852, okay, slavery ended in 1865 and a little bit earlier in some states. So that's 8 plus 5. So about 13, should have been about 13 years old when slavery ended.
The boys were Richard, Pharrell, Caesar, and Fenner. The girls, Rose and Jane. Jane, that's me.
That is your great-great-grandfather's
About 13
sister.
years.
and she is your great, great, great aunt.
Crazy.
Jane Arrington was interviewed as part of what's known as the Slave Narrative Project, a collective oral history comprised of roughly 2,300 interviews with formerly enslaved people. The project was sponsored by the federal government in the 1930s. Jane's words gave Pharrell an intimate glimpse of his ancestors' experience under slavery. Those words also forced him to confront the cruel reality of what those ancestors actually experienced. And the realization...
Pause. Okay, let's see what's actually happening here. So, it's probably gonna be hard for me to get through this whole video because it's not that long. Okay, so first of all, this woman they're talking about would have been 13 years old when slavery ended. Okay, so when they continue, we're gonna listen to see if she talking about when she was a child or when she's an adult, because if she's an adult, then that's something else. Also, they're showing you pictures. They're not telling you who these people are. He said before, it's so rare for any quote unquote African American to have documentation of these stories. Yeah, he just said 23. They have interviews of 2,300 different people. Then he said that this was funded by the federal government to create slave narratives in 1930. Why would you need 2,300 interviews to create narratives? Right? I really wonder how many of these slave movies and all these different things like that, they took bits and pieces of interviews and created their own narrative around what these people are saying. He's creating a narrative right here. Let me go back. We have no idea what these people are doing in these pictures. All you see is black and white pictures of people that look like me, of copper colored people. You see people in suits looking nice, fresh and clean. I mean, you see an old lady outside. I mean, of course they want that to seem like a slave picture, but she just an old woman. This is literally just an old black woman. Then you continue. You see all these people in suits. How do we know that these people are not, for one, especially this whole suit with these group of guys, they could be Freemasons. How do you know they don't own a business, don't own a company? How do you know they don't own a farm? How do you know how old these pictures are? Okay, if they're creating this narrative in 1930s. Okay. That's the other thing. They've taken these pictures in the 1930s. Slavery was over for almost 100 years by the time they was taking these pictures and doing these slave narratives. I would say like 80 years ago. Yeah. Slavery was over for about 80 years. All these people in these pictures look dressed nice. These people don't look like, This woman look like a daggone seamstress. So they do this all the time. And I haven't went back to watch stuff like this in a very long time because I've just been so focused on my ancestry, doing the actual work of genealogy and looking at it without judgment and thinking outside the box and just using critical historical thinking instead of slave narratives, right? That they just said they were creating in the 1930s. Around that same time, they was creating the Back to Africa theory at the same time. This is also the time when they were creating eugenics. The eugenics movement was big. So he just said a whole mouthful and most people won't even pay attention to that. And he's saying this mouthful as he's going across pictures of black people looking really well, looking clean, actually, in black and white pictures. And you have no idea when these pictures were taken. He could have took this picture in 2015. They got filters. These are pictures. You see what I'm saying? These are old people. They got people that look like this right now. Look at this. They got a picture of This looked like they put that together for real. Now you got old black people and you got them dressed in a particular way, but really that's how people dressed back then, whether you was a slave or not a slave. But they want our mind to go to slavery because he's talking about slavery. Oh, we compiled all these interviews. Where's the other interviews? Where's the other videos? Can we see those? Right? Crazy. Where are all the people you talking about? Because this is just random people. What are these people's names? Can I go look them up? Can I look these people up? Of course not. This man said a whole handful. Then they got, okay, now they in these mud houses. If this was in the 1930s during the Great Depression, that's how people was living. That's how houses were built back then. Busted and disgusted. We have come a very long way. We've come a very long way in a very short amount of time. Then you have, but even then, look how clean they dressed. Look how clean they dressed. That's crazy. Then they bust out. Of course, they always want to have the children picture, and they always got to have a black girl holding a baby. Have y'all ever noticed how they always do that? They always have a black girl holding a baby, a child holding a baby, like she the one taking care of the child, even though they got adults right there. Why do they always do that? Why do they do that? Why do they do that? Why do they do the same thing? Now these kids, they look pretty clean, but some of them a little dirty, but they outside. Your kids gonna get dirty outside. For the most part, they look clean as I don't know what. They look like they either at a church, an old school church, or they at their house, or they at school. There's no context. He's trying to give you context by saying, oh, we put an narrative. Literally, these are just pictures of black people. We have no idea if they own businesses again. We have no idea if they own that house that they're in, they own the school, own the church. We don't know anything about that. So they leave you to assume a lot of things that we're not going to be assuming right now. Okay? Now, let's continue with his foolishness.
Realizations concerning his great-great-grandfather Fenner strike Pharrell particularly hard. So we estimate Fenner was born between...
They always want your emotions to be striked particularly hard. They want our emotions always to be striked particularly hard when we're looking up our genealogy. That's what they want us to believe, is we're going to be emotional, crying all the time.
1855 and 1857. Okay, we're pretty sure about that.
Wait, let me go back. What is he talking about?
So we estimate that Fenner was born between 1855 and 1857.
So he was even younger than the woman he was initially talking to, his great aunt. So if he was born between 1855 and 1857, slavery was only going on for either he was 10 years old when it ended, or he was 8 years old when it ended. So I'm real interested in how he gonna put this together.
Okay, we're pretty sure about that. So you know what that means. That means that he was most likely born into slavery and not freed until the end of the Civil War.
Wow. At 10 years old.
At 10 years, let's talk about
the first 10 years of his life would have been spent in slavery.
Wow.
That's an assumption, right? You see how let's go back. That is an assumption, because he does not say we have records that your great-great-great-grandfather was a slave for 10 years of his life, or 8 years of his life. He didn't say they have records. He didn't say none of that. He just said, we're assuming that, okay, because you are black, and because we're assuming he's dark-skinned, and we're assuming that all dark-skinned people were slaves before 1865, that your great-great-great-grandfather was a slave. That is an assumption.
And spent in slavery.
Wow.
You know, we tend to think of as adults, but think about a little boy.
Think about a little boy. See, now they're going to imagination. Imagine. See, look at him. He's over there. He's trying to get himself emotional. Now he has to imagine that his great grandfather was a slave when he between the ages of 0 and 10 years old. He has to imagine this because why? They have no hard facts for one. They have no pictures of him being enslaved. They have no records of him being enslaved because if they did, they would have said it. Okay, they don't have a narrative to put there, so they're creating the narrative for you, and they're telling you, you know, imagine. We always talk about adults, but imagine your great grandfather, even though they have no record of that, was a slave between 0 and 10.
I don't want to cry, and I'm trying not to be angry.
You're not a machine. This is horrendous. What else can you feel? It's horrible.
This is fake as hell.
It's intense, sir. It's intense.
This is so fake.
Pharrell's ancestors likely suffered
Who
more
is that? Who are these people?
than he can even imagine. In her interview, Jane recalled minute details about their daily lives on a
Pause. Now, this is an assumption. Again, they always put these random pictures of random people. Who are these people in the picture? What are their names? What are they doing? Okay, this picture, they're picking cotton. How do we know that this cotton field is not theirs? Again, I said this in the other video. I was talking to my grandpa, and we talk about this stuff a lot. And I told him, because he would tell me stories about how he used to pick cotton in the cotton field on his grandfather's land. On his grandfather's land and the neighbor's land. But guess what? He was getting paid. And that was a viable way, a viable job that people did. They didn't like doing it. We do jobs we don't like doing, but they was getting paid. And a lot of people with his same complexion was getting rich off of it. Okay? So we are left to assume that these people in this picture are picking cotton on some imaginary white man's land. Okay, and they're not getting paid for it, and nothing, you know, even though a picture like this would not have been able to be taken in 1865 and beyond. So 9 times out of 10, they was taking these pictures in 1930 when they were creating these narratives. He's telling you what's going on. Okay, so question everything. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm just telling you to question.
cotton plantation, revealing the degradation they endured every day.
And my grandpa told me the degradation they endured every day. He said he didn't like it. It was bad on his back. But they did it because they was making money. It was making a lot of money back then. Now, they weren't forced to do it, but the way he was telling me when he was a kid doing it, though, because when you're a kid, you're the same height as the cotton, pretty much. He was like, it was fun. We liked it. We enjoyed it. I was like, sir, what? And it's a perspective you never, ever think about. You never hear because we don't talk to our elders. We just listen to people like Henry Louis Gates tell us narratives with this silly ass sad music underneath it, which controls our emotions, and he's trying to make Pharrell fake cry on camera. It's horrific. You should feel all of it. You have no idea what to feel because he ain't tell you nothing. He didn't give you no information really. He just gave you assumptions to assume. Now let's see what the actual person is saying.
We lived in log houses with stick and dirt chimneys. They called them the slave houses. I worked on the farm, cutting corn stalks and tending to cattle in slavery time. Sometimes I swept the yards. After working all day, there was a task of cotton to be picked and spun by them. What kind of people? What kind of people? It puts a very vivid.
What? What? Did I miss something?
It puts a very vivid. It's intense, sir.
Wait, what?
There was a task of cotton to be picked and spun by them. What kind of people? What kind of people?
There was a task of cotton to be picked and it was spun by them? I'm confused. What are you talking about? This is so crazy. It's so weird. If you actually listen to what they're actually saying, none of what they actually have said is outlandish. Whether you call it a slave house or whatever the case may be, she said they lived in mud houses. They called it the slave house. I shucked corn. Then I had to sweep the floor. Then I had to, we picked cotton and we spun the cotton. And then also, this is important. This is really important. They are not saying how old she is at this moment either. So we don't know if this is before slavery ended or after slavery ended. And for a lot of y'all who don't understand what that means, basically what we think of as slavery is largely what we have right now, a system of a corporation and an employer. Back then, they had a system of basically bartering and different things like that. So we are still basically working to have a place to live in and to have food. We're still basically at the same place. Everything else, we do a little leisure every once in a while, but the main thing is a place to stay and food, okay? Now, people of all races, this is what they don't talk about. He's not gonna interview anybody who's found out that they have Irish slaves from America in their ancestry, or from England. From England in America in their ancestry. They're not gonna do this research, but nothing he just really said was dramatic and crazy. The only way it's dramatic and crazy is if you allow yourself to imagine Hollywood and all this other stuff that was going on. This is how people lived, whether they were called a slave or whether they were called a slave owner, whether they were called, everybody was working for the most part, unless you're just super, super duper rich. Everybody had to sweep their floor. They had to shuck corn if they wanted to eat corn. They had to pick cotton if they wanted to make clothes. Okay, they had to do everything manual. So for them to, it's like you could tell he's really not emotional, but they're trying to make this sound emotional, but it's really not. The only thing that makes it emotional is the word slave. When you use that word slave, it's a trigger word. Okay, we need to break that spell. We need to break that trigger. And listen to what he's actually saying and not the dramatic music and the dramatic gestures.
What kind of people? It puts a very vivid.
This is so fake. This is so fake.
Intense context behind what it means to be African American.
See, this is where it always goes. This is where it always goes. This is where it always goes. Now, you just described that your ancestor, okay, from the 1800s or the early 1900s lived in a mud house. She shucked corn. She swept the damn floor. She picked cotton and she spun the cotton. If you talk to any elder from America that is 80 and up, really 70 years old and up, they will tell you they shucked corn, they swept the floor, they lived in mud houses, or a lot of them lived in dirt houses. They had no electricity. They picked cotton. I've talked to white people that are older from the South. They picked cotton as children, okay, and with their family. And they spun the cotton because why? These are resources. Everything was manual. What does this have to do with being an African American? Why are they trying to be dramatic? Why are they trying to be dramatic?
And I thank God that I got to hear it. When I'm so sorry they went through this.
Oh, nobody should have gone through this.
It's a lot, man.
Oh,
I have to say I'm forever changed.
This is really why, and this is why it's so important for us to talk to our elders, because for us in 2022 to hear that somebody was shucking corn because we go to the grocery store and we just pick corn from the grocery store, we don't do any manual work. We're listening, we're like, oh my God, they was shucking corn. Oh my God. They was sweeping the floor. They was picking cotton and spinning the cotton. We think that is so outlandish because guess what? We go to the grocery store, we pick up our corn, we even have it canned already. We ain't even gotta shuck it, we ain't gotta pick it, we ain't gotta grow it, we ain't gotta do nothing. We don't have to pick cotton and spin cotton for us to have clothes on our backs and towels and all this other stuff. All we gotta do, we go to the store. We don't even go to the store anymore. We get it on Amazon. Everything I just said, we could get on Amazon at this point. So when we hear that our ancestors in the 1900s was doing all this, when I hear my grandpa talk about this, all the stuff, the manual stuff that they had to do for everything, I'm like, Grandpa, you were a slave. Don't you know you were a slave? And I'm like, I wasn't no goddamn slave. I wasn't no goddamn slave. And that's what I was telling him. I was like, Grandpa, do you know if somebody took a picture of you and your family picking cotton on their own land in the 30s, do you know they would assume that y'all were slaves? He's like, they wouldn't think we were slaves. We own that land. We own that land. Right? How do we know that this plantation that he's talking about, how do we know that they don't own the plantation? How do we know that that's not their family plantation and that they were the youngest members of the family? So they lived in the slave quarters and different things like that, because a lot of times plantation owners, if they weren't huge plantation owners, their family members were the slaves or the workers, their children, their children's children, their cousins, their aunts, their uncles, their nieces, nephews. Those were the people working the fields, okay? Because they would be heir to that when they get older. So they didn't have a problem with that. And even if you lived on your own, you would still be doing a lot of that work. It would just be for your own personal family and you just live it off your own land, but you still had to do all that work. You had to do all that work to survive unless you were super rich. That's what I need everybody to know. It don't matter if you're black, white, Chinese. I hope y'all getting this. Some of y'all gonna, oh, she's in denial. She doesn't want to believe that her people were slaves. When I find actual records that say that they were slaves, because there are those records out there. He's saying there's the records, right? But a lot of times they try to take things out of context. And a lot of my ancestors, they had occupation. It shows the occupation. It says they were farm hands. It says they were farmers. It says they were clerks. It says they were accountants. It says there were masons. There were bricklayers. All kinds of different occupations that my ancestors had. But they don't want y'all to know that we was doing. Okay, so what else y'all got to say? Y'all got about 10 seconds left with me.
Retrieving lost stories
Okay, that was over.
can be an act of restoration, not only of our ancestors.
You didn't even tell I want to read that whole document. I would love to read that entire document from start to finish. That's what I would love to do. Now, for anybody saying, oh, you're in denial, you blah, 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 whatever. I'm not in denial. I want to read the whole document. Not this little cherry pick piece that really didn't even make no damn sense. And how are we to know what that actually said, if that's really what the thing says? That's what I want to know. I'm questioning everything. Because all I saw was fake emotions just now. It was all fake. It was very fake, okay? I'm not about to be playing no emotional music underneath my videos when I'm talking about telling a narrative, because that's what he just said. They were putting together narratives in the 1930s, okay? And they're continuing to use us to put together narratives and celebrities. So, think for yourself. Do your own research. I'm working on a program for y'all. Like, subscribe, comment below, and check my description for different things. Keep in contact with me. Go on my Instagram and all this other stuff, right? I'll see y'all in the next video.